So before we start, can you see my screen, everybody? Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Laura. So today we're going to be talking about motivation. It's part of a bigger picture that I'll explain to you about in a few minutes. So basically, we've got this question that we need to be thinking about today, and it's how would a child in your class be motivated and empowered to storytell their learning journey? So today's CPD is split into 2 sessions. So the first part, we're going to do the overview of our new learning today, that's called Marge. Then we're going to be thinking about how we relate motivation to the 4 C's and the 5 R's. And then we're going to think about how children in our school share their learning by talking through as if it's a story, so they can recall in a storytelling manner. The second part of it is all about the next step of our CPD programme, and that's going to be looking at the CPD phase PowerPoints that we're going to be making, and also excitingly how we're going to present the CPD. And for this part, Dave will be joining me to explain what we're going to be doing. So the first thing, remember, every time we do CPD, we split it into mindset, skill set and tool set. So let's just go right back and think about what we actually want from our children, why we're doing what we do. So basically on the left, you can see there's a novice, the child who's the beginner, and then the child who's the expert. And that's ultimately what we're aiming for. We're aiming to give the children as much knowledge and expertise as possible so that they feel confident and that their schemas are enhanced. So they have more domain expertise. And then the triangle that we use for ourselves, this triangle of influence, also applies to the children. So we're wanting to get them away from being dependent and moving into independence, and then finally interdependence. So what they're doing is actually influencing, and they're beginning to network within their own little child speak networking. But they can do this, and so we're aiming to get up here. So we're immersing them, embedding, introducing the new learning, letting them question and explore it, and then influencing the network, how they share it, which of course is the trivium. So the skill set is always the research that we've found and the evidence. So remember, everything that we do, we look at both sides of the argument, and that it's all related to our children. So we're not just finding random research. This is very specifically sought after. So I'd like to introduce you to Arthur P. Shimomura. So unfortunately, he died in 2020, but he had done like really amazing work. And it's only recently that people have started to talk about him. So from about 2017, his name has started to be kicked around a little bit. And he was the founder of the Cognitive Neuroscience Society. He was really interested in science. He's won lots of awards as a teacher, and he was a respected leader within this science and cognitive science network. And he pursued the highest ideals of science and service, profoundly impacting on our understanding of memory, amnesia, and brain mechanisms. And he really was interested in the relationships between art and cognitive neuroscience. And that's his book. So I emailed that out to you because I think it's literally only like 50 pages or something. It's a really short document, and it just basically will give you an overview of what we're doing in the next few weeks.
20 minutes for the staff meeting, and then.
So I took this from Tom Sherrington's website, and him and Ollie Cav have put together this brief overview here about what Marge actually is. So how we can motivate, how we can encourage motivation for our pupils, how we can ensure that they're attending their learning and that they're relating to their learning, that they're generating their learning, they're selecting, organising and integrating, and then that they're evaluating, they're doing their feedback. So I'll just give you a minute. If you just read the one that says motivate, for me that would be great. Okay, I'll send you a copy of this PowerPoint anyway, just in case I'm moving a bit fast. But basically, Marge is a little bit different to what we've been doing in other sessions because Marge is very much conceptual. And so I've tried to explain it as much as I can, and I really hope that it's very clear what we want, but it is a little bit different. But I feel that we can apply this because it's all motivation, so it's a really good thing for us to be focusing on. So the walkthroughs have a short section about Shimamura's Marge model. So motivate, attend, relate, generate, and evaluate. And here from the diagram, you can basically get the gist of how the existing knowledge influences the schema, which develops the new schema, and how through chunking activities and motivating, that makes our memory, our brain hold the memories in a more effective way. So it fits really beautifully with what we were looking at in the past few sessions. So everything that we've been doing previously about questioning and feedback was actually part of Dylan Williams' formative assessment strategies. So this fits beautifully with our 5R loop. So basically, Marge was published in 2018. It's a whole brain learning approach. So that's why I was saying it's a little bit more conceptual as opposed to concrete. And each element leads to practical suggestions underpinned by cognitive science. And we don't soak up learning. It requires top-down processing where we actively use existing knowledge to guide and select relevant information. So that fits, just touching really briefly on to the generative learning model of selecting, organising and integrating. We purposely choose what we teach to the children, and we make sure that we teach it in a way where our children can remember, and we use cognitive science to back that up, basically. And so to motivate, we should support students to generate the mental motivation to focus on the material in hand. And Shimamura says that this can be done by stimulating curiosity, framing learning through big questions and links to overarching schema, which then harnesses the storytelling, basically what will happen next. And the aesthetic questions engaging students' emotional responses and personal views. So we'll go into that in a little bit more depth. But basically, bringing back to the learning that we've been doing, we've spent a lot of time over the last few sessions looking at probing questions and checking for understanding, and also process questions and metacognition. So now we're going to look at the next lot of questions, which are called big questions. And these are the aesthetic questions that stimulate emotional responses in our brains. So that would be such as, what do you think? How does it make you feel? And why is this good? So Shimamura has done a lot of work on this aesthetic questioning and has realised that when you make the questions have an emotional response, it really engages, and our brains remember that very well. So we need to think, when we're doing our probing questions, process questions, how can we also ensure that we're putting in the emotional responsory questions, so the big questions. And here we are, the aesthetic question engages emotional brain circuits and forces us to attend to and organise our knowledge. So here are some photos that I've taken from the BJ Fogg website. He has done a lot of work about motivation. And basically he talks about, he has a BJ Fogg motivation curve that you've probably seen. And he talks about the 4 different parts. So sensation is a core motivator. So pleasure, obviously if something is pleasurable, we want to be motivated to do it. Whereas pain is a tricky one, because sometimes if something is hard for us to do, that motivates us, it gives us the challenge and we want to do it. Whereas if it's too hard, the motivation goes and it switches off. So it's a very fine balance. This one just reminded me a little bit of Mary Myatt, where she's basically, when she's talking, she's always saying that we push children to the next level, that we're always looking. If we think that they can't do it, we give them the opportunity, we challenge them. Anticipation is a core motivator. So if we're anticipating that something is going to happen, we're hoping, and that will motivate us to do it. Whereas on the other hand, fear can be, sometimes it can motivate us because it's something unknown, we're going to do it, we're going to have a go. But on the other hand, sometimes fear makes us a little bit scared and will stop things being motivated. And belonging. So of course, social acceptance and social rejection. And here he is. So hopefully this is the video I was just testing. So this is BJ Fogg, and he talks about his behavior model here. So he uses motivation and ability. And he's saying if we engage motivation and ability correctly along this curve, it ultimately enhances behavior and learning behavior. So fingers crossed.
So just do a thought experiment with me.
Hang on. Pardon?
You're going to need to reshare your screen.
Okay.
Share the Google Chrome page.
Sorry, I just have to reshare my screen. How do I do that, Dan, now?
Can you see that right?
Yeah.
I can't hear it, Eve.
Oh, hang on, Dan's coming back.
Love a bit of technical difficulty.
It wouldn't be Teams without it.
It wouldn't.
That's why I have my
Right,
IT
I'll start
support
again.
with me, just in case. You should be able to hear it in a minute. I didn't click
I'll
the
put it
button.
back to the start.
So just do a thought experiment with me.
Perfect.
Your mobile phone rings and you don't answer it because. Now just jot down a couple reasons why, and this has happened to you, right? Your mobile phone rings and you don't answer it. So write down a couple reasons. Why didn't you answer the phone? So everybody's pulling out paper. If you don't want to pull out paper, just keep it in your head. That's fine too. Now this is a really simple thought experiment. But what it will show us, I hope, and hopefully you'll come to the same conclusion, is there's a formula for behavior change, and it's not so complicated. Okay, so we ready? Now, one of the things that has to happen for us to do any behavior is we have to have a trigger, something that says, do this now. So if I go like this, you shook my hand. So this was a trigger, so that was a trigger. If you're sitting at a red light and it turns green, you go. That's a trigger. When your phone rings, the ring is a trigger. So that's number one. That's pretty simple. Now let's get to the other pieces. Now, I don't think this will be too complicated. Take your left hand, look at your list of reasons that you didn't answer the phone. And if it had to do with, I was in a meeting, I was in the shower, I didn't hear it ring, raise your left hand and just keep it up. How many of you had reasons like, I was in a meeting, I was busy? Okay, most people have their left hand up. Keep it up. All right, now think of the other reasons you put down. I saw who was calling. I was in a bad mood. I didn't want to talk to them. Okay, the other hand, right? Okay, whew, we did it. We're done. So what you have there, the first one is an ability factor. The phone rings, I hear it, I'm in the shower, I can't really do it, so that's ability. The second one is the phone rings, I look at it, it's like, I don't really want to talk to them, that's motivation. So right there, boom, done. Like I said, I wish I'd known this in 1995. It's that simple. For a behavior to happen, 3 things have to come together at once. And so I gave it a name. I call it the Fogg behavior model. Trigger, you have to have the ability to do it, and you have to have the motivation to do it. Those 3 things have to happen at the exact same moment. And if any one of those things is missing, it won't happen.
Okay. Hang on a minute. Where's it gone? Yeah, that's the one. Just putting the PowerPoint back on. Okay, so from BJ Fogg, then we should be thinking about the triggers that we have and how the triggers and the ability affect motivation. So now on to the tool set. So now we need to think about how we apply this to our actual pupils and to our teaching. So just 2 questions that I just want you to keep in mind throughout the next slides. So how would a child in your class be motivated and empowered to storytell their learning journey? And which tools do we have that could support the child with their motivation and sense of empowerment? So if you just take 2 minutes now to talk about these 2 questions within your teams, and then we'll move on to the next few slides. Okay, so we've just been discussing it here. Is there anybody now that wants to quickly feedback their thoughts about yellow? Anyone from yellow?
Oh, I was just looking for my unmute button there, Eve. Hello.
Hello, Kalyan.
We had a good chat over in early years, and we were saying actually for our little ones, lots of them would rely on the learning walls, especially for a project. We were saying with manipulatives are another big one. So say, for example, slightly off task, but thinking to maths this week, if the children saw the manipulatives on the table, they'd quite happily tell you all the learning that we've been doing this week. Tapestry we use quite a lot at the end of the day, where the children will look at a photograph that's been captured throughout the day and tell us what they've been up to. A text map is a really good one in early years for what story we're learning at the moment. And also modelling. I think the children often model in their play what's been modelled to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they retain it, don't they? And then they put their own spin on it when they're retelling their story. Absolutely.
Yeah, they certainly do.
Thank you. Anyone from Red want to feedback? Here comes Ellie, I think.
I'm here.
Hi, Ellie.
Hello. We were just, I was reflecting on my class mostly because it was just Siobhan and I in the room, which was really nice because obviously Jess just went to the toilet, by the way. She's here. She just went to the toilet. So obviously Siobhan's taught my class before. So we were talking about the characters and the different learners in there. Mostly my children are much more motivated to share their journey at the end and look back when they've got their final outcome, and they're super proud of what they've done, and they kind of are very good when they compare to my model and they pick out why theirs is better than my model. I've only got a few children that can talk about their learning journey and then talk about what they're going to do next when they're in the middle of it. The majority of mine look back rather than looking forward.
Yep, and look at the end.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yep, thank you. Dan, do you want to feedback for us for Blue?
Yeah. Come over there, then.
Yeah, come here.
Yeah, so we said, how would a child in your class be motivated and empowered to tell their story? We said that if they felt they were successful and they had some success in the subject. We talked about if they knew how to share, that might empower them as well. When it comes to the tools that they would use, the graphic schemas and the knowledge organisers that we put at the front of the books or the front of the unit, they could talk through that. And I think that's as far as we got.
Yeah,
cool.
Lovely, thank you. And Green, please, anyone from Green?
Hi, it's Helen.
Helen. Hi, Helen.
Okay, so we certainly agreed with Ellie about they tend to look back rather than think about where they're going in the future. Although they can quite often ask some really fantastic questions, and we were saying one of the problems with motivation actually can be we are intrinsically bound by the national curriculum and our timetables and having to achieve certain objectives at certain points in the term, and we can't do that bit of actually this is really motivated and focused class, but we just don't have time to go in that direction because it's not part of what we should be learning, if that makes sense. So we ended up having quite a sort of in-depth discussion on the whole concept of motivation.
Okay, thank you. And there's a time lag when I speak. And what about support centre, please?
Hiya, it's Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, lovely. Yeah, we agreed with everybody. Obviously, we also use the talk tins because a lot of ours get quite embarrassed. Obviously, or get worried about that, or trusted adult to film them maybe, just one-to-one until they felt confident to share. But we, at the end of the day, have been doing a lot of sort of storytelling. So we get the children to read stories or share comics to build their confidence. And before lockdown, bless, we were doing show and tell. So that was really helping. So I think constant modelling and practice so they can actually have confidence to share.
Yeah, fab. Thank you. So on to the next one now. So I'm going to have to share my screen again to share this, unfortunately. We're not going to watch the full thing, but basically Brian Cox here explains quite a tricky phenomenon that he's talking about, and the way that he talks about it is great. I just thought it was a really good video clip to show about how you can explain in a storytelling manner. So Dan's here to help me. We won't watch the full thing because it's like 5 minutes or something.
engineers were concerned with the efficiency of steam engines. You know, how hot should the fire be? What substance should you boil in the steam engine? Should it be water or should it be something else? These were profound questions. And out of those questions arose the science of thermodynamics. It's when concepts like heat and temperature and energy entered the scientific vocabulary for the first time. Now, along with that deeper understanding emerged what is probably the most important law of physics for understanding the evolution of the universe and the passage of time. It's called the second law of thermodynamics. The reason the second law of thermodynamics was so profound was because...
I'm just going to reshare that one. It's had a bit of a nightmare.
Back in the 19th century, engineers were concerned with the efficiency of steam engines. You know, how hot should the fire be? What substance should you boil in the steam engine? Should it be water or should it be something else? These were profound questions. And out of those questions arose the science of thermodynamics. It's when concepts like heat and temperature and energy entered the scientific vocabulary for the first time. Now, along with that deeper understanding emerged what is probably the most important law of physics for understanding the evolution of the universe and the passage of time. It's called the second law of thermodynamics. The reason the second law of thermodynamics was so profound was because at its heart it contained a radically new concept, something physicists call entropy. Entropy explains why, left to the mercy of the elements, mortar crumbles, glass shatters, and buildings collapse. And a good way to understand how is to think of objects not as single things, but as being made up of many constituent parts.
So just getting it back onto me.
Yeah.
Okay, just get it back on. It's a bit of a faff, this, isn't it? So basically, the gist of that video is talking about how we can take the most tricky concepts, and the way that we explain them to the children can almost be like we are telling a story. The way that we use our voice, the vocabulary that we use. I couldn't see this YouTube video as it was playing, but the way that he uses his hands, these gestures, the way that we tell it really helps the children to understand. And there's another one here that I wanted to show you. So let's have a look. This one is really nice because this is a video that some children have made, and it's about talking about how they've been motivated to tell their story about, I think it's a geography project that they've been doing. And it's just a really sweet video and just shows how we can motivate the children to tell their story that they're learning. So it's only like a 50-second clip. So fingers crossed that it will work properly the first time now.
Eve, I'm still frozen on your first PowerPoint slide. I don't know if everyone else is.
I don't know. Are you, Ryan?
No.
No.
Well, that's me. I might have to pop out and pop back in, but carry on.
I'll let you back in if you do.
Sorry.
Or I'll try and let you back in.
This is a sea cliff. It gets eroded by the waves. A cave is formed. The cave gets hollowed through. If it extends to the other side, an arch is created. The top part becomes too weak and it collapses, leaving a stack. The stack gets further eroded to finally leave a stump.
I just thought that was a really nice clip to share because it shows how we can adapt, and the children are so interested in what they're learning, and that would have really motivated them, and they will remember that learning that they've done. So hopefully getting a little quicker at doing this now. Here we are. So we just need to think about what we use in our class, our tools, how we can use them to motivate the children to tell their story. So not particularly telling their story as in literally picking up a book and telling a story, but telling their story of the journey of their learning that they've done, how they've selected what they're learning, how they're organising it, and how they're integrating it. So it's very much going back to our trivium, isn't it? It's very much going back to the recalling, the questioning and exploring, and then the declaring and sharing, being confident enough to share their learning, to tell their story. So Daniel Williams says, the human mind seems exquisitely tuned to understand and remember stories, so much so that psychologists sometimes refer to stories as psychologically privileged, meaning that they are treated differently in memories than other types of material. And there are four main parts. So the causality, through stories, we develop an understanding that events are not random, they all connect. So that's the schema, basically. One thing causes another. So well understood notion to the extent we seek out causality, we're thinking about it as stories unfold. So if you remember, if we go way back to the work that we did with Ollie Cav about the schemas, this is all about it, the causality, the linking. The conflict, so stories often involve a protagonist needing to overcome difficulties in pursuit of a goal and challenges to overcome. Complications with subplots, subproblems, that's what gives storytelling depth and adds interest. And characters. Good stories have strong characters, their qualities become evident through actions, and we deduce their qualities rather than having to be told. So why should we use storytelling to help motivate and improve the memory of our children? So they're easy to understand, they're easy to comprehend. Because of our experience, stories leads us to seek out the links, the schemas, the causality, to make connections, to anticipate and refer back, leading to thinking and memory making. So if you think about the prior knowledge, and we know how important it is to refer back to prior knowledge, and we do this more naturally with storytelling than other formats. And they're interesting. So storytelling formats register higher interest levels than other, because we have to make inferences, and it's subconscious inferences. So we don't need to be told all the details. We don't need to have too many spoilers. We just enjoy doing the puzzles. Not too hard, not too easy. And the stories have that effect too. So if somebody's telling you a story, it holds your interest. And they're easy to remember. So I know when I go on courses and somebody tells me a story, an analogy, it really, something triggers in my mind. I can understand where they're coming from, and that's what I remember. And that's exactly the same for the children. So that is all by Daniel Willingham in 2010, and it's taken from his book, Why Kids Don't Like School. So it's really interesting, and there's a whole chapter about storytelling and why we should use storytelling as a process. So I've been thinking about how we storytell, and this is why we asked you to bring along your clarification of thinking and your book mock, because in a second I'll just give you time just to look through and just chat within your teams about how what you've planned will help your children to tell their story. So this is just an example of one of the tools that we have. So obviously this is year 4 geography, clarification of thinking. So how we do this, how the stages of assessment, how we identify immediately whether it's going to be recall, questioning and exploring, or whether we're going to be declaring and showing and communicating, what we're going to be doing, how long, and what format, the method of assessment that we're going to be checking. Then into the individual session plans. So this is really important that we've identified target pupils, focus pupils who may need a little bit more support. So I'm not thinking, when I say ability, I don't mean ability groups. If you think back to the BJ Fogg curve that we were talking about, when he's talking about the motivation and the ability, we're talking about things that may stop the children from being able to access their learning, to be motivated. So it's really important that we do identify these children, and this is why it's so important that we do this frontish sheet for our session plans. Then of course we've actually got the session plans. So this one is the first of our geography sessions. And obviously so what I'll do now, after this learning, in my next geography session, I will now try and plan in some big questions, some aesthetic questions as well. So I've got probing, got process. Now I want to bring in the emotional element and ask them, because they know this. Our geography topic is all about basically our world, biomes and rivers, but it links with climate and climate control, and they did a lot of work on that last time. So I'm going to go down the emotional element, the aesthetic questioning, the big questions, and hopefully it will enhance their learning even more. And then we mustn't forget this. I thought this is a really important document that we do have. So again, this is filled out for geography this year, and it's talking about, here are our questions that we would ask them to encourage debate as we're learning. Maybe we could add on some emotional aesthetic questions onto this as well. And then here it talks about how it's got the trivium, how we're doing the recall, how we're doing opportunities for the children to question and explore, and how through storytelling they're going to be sharing. And so storytelling is brilliant because it does encompass all 3 parts of the trivium continuously as well. And so here's some of the tools that we would use to help to motivate and give the children the knowledge and to form our questions on. So obviously we have our knowledge organizer. And here we have our graphic schema. So this is the current graphic schema for the year 4s at the moment. And this was one of our main tools that I would say that we use to motivate and to be asking the children to retell their story. So Dan, I just need your help again, please. So I've just put a link here. I've chosen a video from when the children did their Anglo-Saxon and Viking history topic, and basically they're going through it was the class display, and they're talking through the graphic schema and they're telling their story of what they've learnt. So if we just watch this for a sec, fingers crossed. It's not very long, I think it's like 1 minute 46 or something. This should be the last video.
Wind is renewable and it's always here. Yeah, and wind turbines they make electricity, then they go into your homes. And they're mostly in Scotland.
Yeah, they're mostly in Scotland on hills with lots of wind, and the wind spins the turbine, which then the turbine goes to a generator. It spins, powering a generator, creating electricity. Then goes to a pylon, transformer, changing it to DC to AC. And then to the pylons. And then it goes to the pylons all the way to get to your home, if it's connected. And they can also be found in the oceans and seas, because especially when there's lots of waves, because normally that means like lots of wind and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're found in high and wet places.
Yeah. And hydroelectricity is renewable because it's hydroelectricity. It's something we can really never run out of because it's made of the ocean and water. As long as we don't run out of the dams and we run out, like, if we run out of resources to build the dams, like cement. We'll run out of hydroelectricity, but it is renewable in general. But the dams do block fish passages and they can disturb animal habitats, which is very dangerous because it could flood like lots of and if they're cracked as well, they're damaged, they could also flood and possibly kill thousands, if not millions, of people around them and animals, even habitats.
So you can see from that video clip, I just thought it was a really good one to share. Oh. Oh, really? Quite sure. Sorry about that. So, can you see my slide again now? Yeah. So, sorry, I lost my thread a little bit then because the screen's gone a bit strange. I can't see anyone on it now. Can you still see everything? Yeah. Okay, good. So I just thought I would share that because it's so great how confident the children are in being able to explain their learning and go through it. I mean, and you can see that the little boy at the front is extremely confident. The vocabulary that he's using has really built up, and the children were also able to do that within their books as well with their own graphic schemas. So that's one of the tools, and I personally find that's one of the most effective tools that we have to encourage children to retell their stories, retell their learning. Of course, this is just the front cover for our geography book this time, but we also have our books that the children should be able to talk through and our mock-up books as well. So if you just want to spend 2 minutes, please, just having a look through your clarification of thinking and your mock-up books that we asked you to bring to the meeting. If you have a look through those and discuss in your teams about just be perms them, basically have a look. How are they? Could a child in your class use that to be motivated and be confident and be able to elaborate and tell their story of their learning? Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes to have a quick look through, please. I can see you again now. Okay, we're going to feedback now. So Dan's going to come and feedback his ideas.
Hello. We said that we think they would with the book mock because we think very carefully about the sequence of the unit, and we do lots and lots of oracy stuff to promote and improve their confidence when it comes to sharing. Sorry, I've ruined your PowerPoint slide.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Yeah, so basically we were saying, well, as Dan's just said, basically focus a lot on oracy so that when we come to ask them to talk through their story, they feel confident and they have the self-confidence and they know that they can do it, that they can project clearly and make themselves clear and talk through the sequence of their learning. That's one of the big focuses that we have here in blue. Is there anything different? Carly-Ann, what about yellow?
Hello, well, we don't really use mock-up books like you do.
A little bit different. So tell us, what would you use then?
Well, the only books we have in early years are our phonics and writing book and then our maths books.
Yeah, so maybe just thinking back to what you said before, a lot of the storytelling that the little children do in EYFS is through their practical experiences. Like you were saying, when you taught them something, then they retell it through role play.
So I guess you'll see that in our child initiated planning.
Yeah, you would, I'm sure. And I bet it's very sequenced, so you know it. You are kind of telling a story, and then these children pick up on that and are able to do it in a practical way.
And then I guess that's captured on tapestry, and then they're able to talk about that through the photograph.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. Thank you. It's really good to hear the differences. Thank you. Anyone from Red want to feedback? What are your thoughts, please?
We agreed, Dean. We said we think about the sequence really carefully, and we do lots of oracy in year one. And with regards to year one, we revisit the graphic schema quite a lot through our sequence.
Yeah.
Their memory, so we do a lot of recall in year one so that they're able to re-talk about their learning and what they can remember. But apart from that, I think we agree with what most people are saying. Like, we think about the sequence really carefully. And we go back to the book all the time, so the children are able to talk about what they did last lesson, so that they can talk about what they've learned already and what they're learning about now, so they can talk about their previous learning and their current learning in their book.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ellie, you showed me some fantastic examples today of some children in your class that were able to talk through their learning. Could you just tell everybody about it, because it was amazing what they did?
She's had to step out of the room.
Oh, has she?
Sorry.
Oh, never mind. Basically, Ellie had brought 3 or 4 children round this afternoon for me to have a look at their teaching of reading that they'd done. And it was all, they'd built it up. So they'd done some like dual coding first, and then it was all about the Gruffalo, but they were able to tell me their sequence of learning when I asked them. And it was absolutely amazing. I asked Ellie if she could make a video for us for future reference for them, because they just blew me away. To say they're only 6 and 7, they were just amazing how they could talk through what they'd done. It was really good. Thank you, Red. What about anyone from Green?
Just building on, sorry, I am here in the background.
Hi, Ross.
Just building on from sort of what Red were doing, one thing that we do in Green is we build up the learning journey of the project, for example, on the learning wall with the children. And we found that they're able to then recall key parts of the project and link their learning a lot better by doing it that way. And then also getting them to retrace the graphic schema as well, I think is another good way of how the children can recall their learning and to recall the story of their journey.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think you're right. It's really powerful, isn't it, to use your learning walls and the graphic schema combined, and especially, like you say, when they're tracing it. That's brilliant. Does anyone from Support Centre want to tell us how you help your children retell their story?
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. All right. We don't use mock books at the moment. but we're developing the curriculum at the moment, so it might be something that would be keen to start in September. But we have started to really implement the graphic organisers and things like that in the block at the moment with the knowledge organisers. And we're really starting to push the oracy side of things to give them some more confidence in retelling their stories. But it's all fairly new. But it is a real focus.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
So really quickly now, we've also got some other examples of how, as an academy, we use certain tools to tell our story. And of course, one of the new things, and I really hope that you watched the video that I made yesterday, because I've explained this, otherwise you won't know what I'm talking about. But basically, this Watch Me Become a Reader, my 12-week video diary, is a perfect way for the children and the families to retell their stories about their learning. So I don't mean story as in the literal sense. I mean, from week 1, maybe they've got problems with fluency or decoding or segmenting and blending. And then by week 12, we should be able to see this element of progression, this golden thread that's stringing through, bringing all the learning together. And then the children should be able to talk about their learning. And that's a prime example of storytelling, mapping out our learning journey. And then also, Carly-Ann, you'll like this. I thought not just your floor books, but the science floor books in particular, because we had examples of them, were a great way. The floor books are also another tool that we have as a whole academy to tell the story. So the children should be using the floor books, pick them up, and should be able to just talk through what they learned. Oh yeah, I remember on the day when we went outside and we did blah, 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 blah. It was really good. We learnt this, and it's just an exciting way. So it's ways to motivate the children through telling their learning. So we just need to be thinking about how does Marge, the motivation and the storytelling theory fit into our daily teaching, which we've just done, learning and assessment. So how does it fit in? Obviously, this is our total teaching here, our Mayflower pedagogy. So obviously we have our PLB chart. So does motivation fit into the PLB? Yeah, I'd say pretty much yes. What about the 4 C's? Where would motivation and learning through storytelling come into the 4 C's? What do you think? Which ones do you think it might fit into? What do you think? Anyone from Green? Let's start with Green this time. Where would you put motivation, learning through storytelling in the 4 C's? Anyone from Green?
We are here, Eve. We were just literally just having that discussion and saying that you could put them in all of them, mostly. To a certain degree. Yeah, we can't quite formulate our ideas yet, if I'm perfectly honest. We were just just
in the 30 seconds thinking time.
Well, yeah, it takes a little bit more time to but yeah, just being honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. What do you think, Dan? Blue?
I initially said curriculum, but I think Kelly and Green are maybe correct.
Okay, so you initially thought curriculum, and then maybe you think
maybe it puts into all of them.
All of them. Yeah. Red, what do you think?
Yeah, we sort of said the same. We were saying obviously because like motivation, we're thinking like can do. Yeah. But then it'd be built into your curriculum and your class plan. Yeah, we sort of said the same. All of them.
Yeah, and of course the communication as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And yellow, any thoughts?
Yeah, we think all of them as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think so. I think they're kind of spread between, aren't they? With perhaps more focus on the can-do attitude of the class plan. And of course the communication, because that is their oracy that they're doing. So yeah, absolutely. And then on to the 5 R's. So how does the storytelling, where would that fit on our AFL loop? I'll just give you a minute to have a think.
Maybe recognise, because you use it to recognise misconceptions.
Yeah, Dan's just said maybe recognise, because you would use it to recognise misconceptions.
You're not muted.
No, I'm not muted. Right, anyone else? Carly-Ann, what do you think?
We're just still talking about it. What do we think? The response?
Yeah, you could be under respond, couldn't it, as well? Yeah, definitely. I think definitely recognise it's a good tool, because if the children are retelling the story back, it's a good way to recognise any misconceptions. Record, review. Reviewing, I suppose you're reviewing now what they're learning. They can talk through. So I'll leave you with that one to have a think about that, because that we can come back to that next week. We'll come back to how it fits into our total teaching. Just have that in the back of your mind, please. Because now I really need you to focus for this next part, because this has got some really important information about how we are going to show everything that we've learned as teachers throughout our CPD programme. So can you remember at the very beginning, we've always talked about how we are going to do some kind of portfolios and how we are going to do a presentation. And originally we were thinking of like a teach meet. So I just want to talk through this with you. So I've made one of these up for each phase. Support centre, I've made one for you as well, but I'm just showing the green one, the green model. So basically yours will be the same as this, but just with different colours to reflect your phase. So this is the rationale. I'll quickly read through it. So over the past 2 terms, teaching staff at Mayflower have participated in collaborative CPD sessions. The foci for the sessions have been tailored to the needs of the pupils, with every session aligning to and having explicit links with the Mayflower formative assessment for learning loop, because remember, everything that we've done has gone back to formative assessment. Expert advice has been sought through the use of the walk-through CPD package, providing an evidence-based structure to the sessions. This programme incorporated evidence-based research and hands-on strategies, and the teachers could effectively use in a classroom. These sessions have also been supplemented with further wider research, like when we've looked at William, etc., and notions from a variety of external educational research experts, including educational psychologists and educational coaches. Time has been purposefully allocated when planning the CPD sessions. A rhythm of professional development has enabled teachers to have the time to contextualise their professional learning for specific groups of pupils. Operational and procedural learning has been carefully addressed during phase meeting time. Therefore, weekly CPD sessions have been focused on developing teacher knowledge and enhancing pupil progress and impact. The alignment of introducing, testing, embedding and innovating practice in class alongside engagement with evidence and underpinning pedagogy, critiquing and listening to the views of internal and external experts has been essential throughout the CPD programme. The Mayflower CPD programme has been designed to enthuse and enable all teaching staff in their professional development. Each session has been planned carefully to balance teaching staff development, encouraging staff to be less dependent and develop their independency, and ultimately achieve interdependency. Through continuous professional development, teaching staff should feel confident enough to introduce, test, embed, and innovate their new learning. Teaching staff who are confident to introduce, test, embed and innovate their new learning into classroom practice should desire to share their experiences, inspiring and enabling new or less confident members of staff. And here's a quote from Teacher Development Trust. Teachers in successful CPD engaged in analysis of and reflection and underpinning rationale, evidence and assessment data. And this reflection and analysis was important for bringing about and embedding change in practice. teachers had access to tools for collecting and analysing qualitative evidence about how changes are working on the ground alongside outcome data through, for example, peer observation, use of video, collaborative action research, collaborative work scrutinies and/or structured research lesson study, so that formative evaluation of whether CPD are working can be evidence informed. So teaching staff at Mayflower made declarations to study, focus and be self-accountable for each strand of delivered CPD. As professionals, teaching staff recognise the importance of collecting and analysing data, both qualitative and quantitative, that will affect and impact future teaching. This document provides an overview of each delivered strand from the CPD programme. Teaching staff have been able to model and define the CPD strand, focusing on the problem and the agitation, to question and explore the evidence and research, linking to classroom practice, comparing prior teaching experiences and pupil impact to new learning. Furthermore, teaching staff have been able to declare their findings through a summative discussion showing impact, evaluation, solutions and recommendations. Finally, teaching staff at Mayflower have worked collaboratively to prepare a video presentation it says between 6 to 18 minutes in length, though we've changed it to 8 minutes, to share their continuous professional development, learning and pupil impact. So now I'm going to explain this document to you. So here, remember, here is your pyramid of influence. So the Mayflower CPD programme encourages and supports teaching staff to progress through the 3 stages of dependency, which would be your dependence, independence and interdependence. So we're basically aiming for the top of the triangle to become evidence-informed practitioners, creating capabilities through the development of self-mindset, skill set and tool set. So we're moving from novices to experts in our learning, which will ultimately impact our pupils' learning and their life choices. So here, I'm just going to go through some things here. Basically, as I talked through the storytelling, a lot of the things that we've been focusing on actually all go back to the trivium. So you can see that diagram there, that is what we explain trivium, how we explain it to the children. So recall, question and explore and communicate. So this document is now going to follow a similar version, but it's split into 3 parts. So instead of recall, it's called modelling and defining, then questioning and exploring, and then communicating, which we will do through declaring this document and sharing, which will be the presentation that we do at the end. So very carefully, this explains the select, organise and integrate model of generative learning. So we've seen this before, but it's a while ago since we have seen it. Basically select, organise and integrate. And I mentioned that briefly in our storytelling slides a few moments ago. So how we have the instruction into the sensory memory, we select and that goes into we organise and that goes into the working memory, and then that influences and affects our performance. But to really remember it, we have to take that information and we have to integrate. So for example, something like learning through the storytelling, the probing questions, process questions, really does make us select, organise and integrate as teachers what we teach and how we teach it, but also for the pupils as well. And the final part of this is identifying the problem, the agitation and the solution. So we're going to think about each part of our learning and identify the problem. We're going to identify the agitation and we're going to identify the solution. So this one here on this slide, this is taken from looking from a business aspect. But you can see, so basically when it says target audience, it's talking about our pupils or ourselves as teaching staff. So you just have to adapt that. So first, so this is what your document will look like. So this will be given to you as a phase and will be completed as a phase. And time is allocated to do this because it's a hefty document. But it's really important that we do this because this is our way of declaring what we've learnt. And it makes it clearer, of course, because if you can articulate what you've learnt, it's the highest level of understanding. So each part, everything that we've learnt from the very beginning, the Rose and Shine overview, everything that we've done has got its own part. So this one is just, I've used this as an example from the deliberate vocabulary teaching. So how do you model and define? So everybody will have a slide like this, and you'll just basically, I've tried to make it as structured as I possibly can. So we'll talk about the area of study, you'll do the definition, you do the problem, the agitation, and the solution. So that will be your first slide. Remember, you're going to do this as a phase. It's not individuals, it's working together. It's a collaborative piece of work. Then we're going to look about how we question and explore. So we're going to look here, it's all about the trivium models. So we're question and explore. How does using deliberate vocabulary teaching compare to what you used before? And I've put C diagram below. And what are the similarities and the differences? So Dave, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you can, do you want to jump in and just explain this a little bit?
Thank you, Eve. Yeah, a replication of what we're expecting the children to do as part of the process of planning into their sequence of learning, in the sense that they are able to talk about the breadth of their study. So think about people for a minute and then apply it to your own study now. This the T there from Martin Robertson is his model. And we've just made an H because it just makes sense, I think, to show two T's together. The reason for that is, and Cassie, coming into this new, are mindful of your learning curve here, no matter how much reading you've done. I'm sure this will be really interesting, but let's try and make it really simple. So the breadth of focus for you for the pupils will be, as Dan was talking about in terms of, Ross was talking about in terms of project, will be X, Y, and Z, and then you'll choose things to go deeply into, and the children will probably know more about that than they do the breadth. Similarly, for CPD this year, there'll be lots of things we've talked about, but we want to go deeply into certain areas of the CPD, which Eve's going to explain. But it's really important that to understand and articulate something, you need to be able to compare and contrast, find similarities and differences with something else. So we've talked about how do you know black is black, or how does black look blacker? Well, we stick it next to white, and vice versa. So if you're learning about, let's say, if you talked tonight about Marge, but a certain part of Marge, it would be very important to then, whilst we're questioning and exploring, we also identify in your presentation something that you've looked at that's maybe similar or completely different, that gives you two sides of truth. So Marge and all the theories behind Marge is one truth, say, so that would be one of those T lines. Then there'll be something that is either in conflict with it or something that is very similar but not identical. And somewhere between those two theories or two concepts, there will be conflict. There will be some new truth that you will find. You will create your new truth, your new understanding. So that's why the H is used, not just the T, because we're saying we're going to look at we're just going to model it differently. Just makes sense to me to come in the middle. So if you could imagine, I don't know if you can see the cursor. Can you see the cursor? Over here would be all the information around Marge, say, and you talk about that, you question and explore it and what you did and when you did it. And over here, do you know what? Whilst we've been looking at Marge, you've also considered what that means in relation to this other theory or other concept. And do you know what? We now imagine in the middle, you write all the things you now believe in an educated fashion. So taking account of Marge, taking account of this, we've now come to the conclusion at Mayflower that we should be looking more at this, or we're trying this. So is that all right, Eve?
Yeah, Brill, thank you.
Especially for Cassie. That's all right.
And then what we thought here, step by step. So in my head, when I designed this, I was thinking that the easiest, the most efficient way would be probably to put like some kind of graphic organizer, a flow spray, or whatever you prefer to explain your learning, to tell your story, basically, about what you've learned through, for example, here, deliberate vocab teaching. So then here we're moving on to declaring and sharing. So here we're going to think about the impact that your new learning has had on your pupils in your class. So their impact and the evaluation. And then here, your recommendations, because we want to use this document to help us inform our CPD for next year and to inform improvement across the academy. So therefore, we want your recommendations. If you're going to do this again or in the future, what would you now know that you will change? So these are all the different parts that we'll be doing. So we'll be doing one of these for each. We'll be doing graphic organisers. All of that format you've just seen for vocab will be exactly the same, but for graphic organisers. For an overview of Rosenshine's principles, for probing questions and checking for understanding, process questions and metacognition, emotional logic, feedback as actions and moving forwards, Marge motivation, Marge attending and relating, and Marge generating and evaluating. So as I say, it's a large document, but it's to be done as a phase and there is time allocated. I'll show you in a moment. So here, remember, we've got lots of tools that will help you to support and help you with this learning. So you have all of these videos here that are saved onto the Teams for you. So I double checked last night just to make sure they're there, and yes, they are, and they're still there, and they're for every section that we've just talked about. On here, all of these, there's a video to explain from the experts what everything is. Of course, you've got all of our CPD videos saved and all the PowerPoints that went alongside them. You've got the Padlet, that's got websites, it's got journals, and it's got books that we recommend that also fit. We've got access to the walkthroughs. And of course, don't forget, upstairs in our staff room, we actually have the staff CPD library. And when you look in there, there's a file that's full of journals, and there's also lots of books, and some of them are older but still very relevant, and some are absolutely bang up to date. So if you want to borrow those, just make sure that you sign them out, please. But do use it. It's there to be used. So there's two sections to this, remember. So that is the PowerPoint. That's the writing part of it. That's how you're declaring it. And now you're going to share your learning. So what we've done is we've split all the phases into certain areas. So EYFS, I thought it made sense that your focus would be talking about deliberate vocabulary practice, because that ties in really well with all your speech and language learning that are doing, and I just thought that made sense. Red block, your focus for your presentation will be questioning and checking for understanding. Blue block, we're going to focus on Marge because of motivational dip in year 3 and 4. It made sense for that. Green block, your focus will be feedback and support centre. Daniel, with your expertise in there, we felt it made sense that you focused on vocabulary through oracy and how you feed back to the children in the support centre. So what we're asking you to do is to create an 8-minute pre-recorded video, which actually is not long because you're doing this as a phase, remember, it's not individuals, everything is now as a phase, so it's collaborative. So an 8-minute pre-recorded video. If it goes to 10 minutes, you're kind of pushing it. We want you to try and keep to the 8 minutes. And we're going to give you, well, you're going to have 6 PowerPoint slides to base your presentation on. So we've tried to keep it as structured as possible. We've purposely chosen the 8 minutes and the 6 PowerPoint slides because one of the highest levels of understanding is when you can summarize something and you can clearly articulate it. And so that is why we've chosen to do the 8 minutes and the 6 PowerPoint slides. So each block will be completing this document, which is a PowerPoint. And to go alongside that, each block will be also doing a presentation. Okay, so you've got the written, you're declaring it, writing, you're sharing it verbally. And we have allocated you some time here. So I've updated the CPD calendar. So obviously here, summer 5, this is today. So today's was about motivation. Next week is about Marge and attending and relating. The week after is about Marge, but generating and evaluating information. Then it's the LAT subject groups. And in here, from there onwards, we've tried to allocate as much time as possible. So this one is the 5th week. So this one may be the week then we have to look at some data, but also it's an opportunity for you to start to prepare your PowerPoint presentation. And that here, I did call it a 2-page spread because when I first started doing it, it was 2 pages and then it developed over time. So here you've got the 19th of May and the 26th of May. Then I've allocated some time on the 9th of June for you to do any report writing and planning ahead. 16th of June is another session where you can do your PowerPoint, your 2-page spread, or you can begin to start prepping your presentation. And that week is also when you'll have to put in any data into Insight. So that will be, because it's operational, that goes into phase. 23rd, you've got 2 weeks, the 23rd of June and the 30th of June are 2 weeks dedicated to you preparing your presentations. Then the 7th of July is another LAT meeting. So the 6th of July, which is the Tuesday, is another operational phase where we will be inputting NFER data and doing the data analysis. And then we've got the last 2 final weeks. So we're aiming for the 14th of July, which will be the time then we share our learning. So it's a celebration of learning. It will be the time we come together, we look at everybody's PowerPoint and we look at the presentations. So it will be a real celebration. And it would be great if people feel confident enough that we can publish this. Let's publish it as far and as wide as we can do, because everybody has worked so incredibly hard. We should be proud of everything that you've done. And in the last week, I've put celebration of learning. I've kind of left the last week free because it's the last week before term. So there's always going to be something that pops up that we need to do on that last session. And that is it. So we've got a few minutes. Have we got any questions? Be brave. No, Dave, do you want to say anything?
I'm really interested to hear people's initial thoughts. I'm sure that there are some, and I think that as people are thinking, I think that thank you, Eve. May I just say thank you for spending a lot of time on that. I know that you did a huge amount of work over Easter as well. It's constantly trying to refine a program that really is relevant. I think that's the hardest thing, and I think one of the things that staff need to understand across the school, not just colleagues are here today, is that over the next 10, it's actually 11 weeks, but over the next 10, because we're going to give ourselves another week to sort these things out, we really do need to put COVID not behind us, but start moving on, making some judgments around the quality of teaching, learning and assessment across the academy. What is it that we should be able to be very confident with, that we're doing the most effective things, or what works, and where are there areas that we still need to either improve our own understanding of certain practice, or have more time to develop what it is that we're doing. So that will be one of the outcomes, that we won't just sort of say we're great or not great. We will be able to say as a leadership team and report on this, that the improvement plan next year needs to have time in it, and the calendar next year has to have time in it, and our systems need to enable time for certain areas of schoolwork to be developed. Keep thinking, folks. I do want your feedback, but the most important thing for me, beyond any report that's written on the judgment around quality of teaching, learning and assessment, quality of leadership, good enough to share, is that you as professionals, whether you've been teaching 1 year or 21 years, are able to declare and share, have an opinion, define exactly what it is that you are doing, and explain why you're doing it, your decisions you made, and be very confident about that. Not in a we know everything perspective, but just be able to talk through your story. And as a school, we have certain ways of doing things. So for example, it's very interesting listening there to the planning. one of the things that I'm not challenging Sarah with, that's not fair, but challenging myself and Sarah with, is to come up with an understanding of exactly where we are with planning. What is it that we're supposed to be able to do, by when, and how do our systems allow that to happen? And all other areas of teaching and learning. So also your approach will be what you teach, and what you taught. A lot of this is how you teach, what you plan to teach. We should be in a position by the end of this academic year, with the learning we've had during COVID remotely and in school, that we were able to make some statements around that. Hence why this process, I think, is quite exciting, because we're putting ourselves through the same trivium-like assessment process that we're expecting pupils to do. Can we recall the key facts? Can we question and explore it, or give an indication of what we've done to question and explore it? And then can we declare what we think, what we believe, what we now do? And as a school, as well as individually you in your phases, but also as a school, can we do that too? So wouldn't it be wonderful? Imagine, I'll leave you something to imagine and then ask for your feedback, please. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you were in a school that said, this is what we do to plan, this is the process, this is the systems we use, and this is how it works? Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could then explain the pedagogy, how you teach and how you organise yourselves, and how that's adapted for different subjects? And wouldn't it be most wonderful, the thing we chase our tails with, and we spend a lot of time in offices doing, and let's do less of that, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we could then be very clear about the impact those other two things have had? That all, of course, links to intent implementation in terms of vocabulary and impact for Ofsted. It's just a different way of framing it. So enough from me, and a big thank you, Eve. Come on then, let's take the mic and just give some initial feedback, even if it's just questions. Are there maybe are there areas of the trivium approach for you now, thinking about how you use that to explain yourselves, or us explain ourselves? Are there any areas there that you're not sure about? Would you like some more clarity on? Are you excited by it? Are you fearful? Are you nervous about all the things around only having 10 weeks to pull a whole year's worth of learning together, a lifetime of learning together, etc., etc.? It'd be nice to get a sense of every phase, I think, for me, because I think that's how we finish well.
Hello. So for early years, we were saying actually we're really excited about our focus on deliberate vocabulary, and we've got lots to say. So we're looking forward to making that video for you. We were saying that we've got a lot on with early years this term. So 10 weeks, it is a bit scary. We've got a brand new curriculum to do lots of other things. So I think that the CPD calendar feels a little bit overwhelming for us at the minute. Makes us feel a little bit scared, but outcome we're excited about, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Kylie. I'm glad you voiced that. I would imagine that's echoed across the school. And it's one of those things that we'll have to come back to at Molt, isn't it? But I urge you to hold on to that and use that, it's a realistic thing, and it's important we hear it. And we could easily say we do nothing now other than just those things. And I agree that would be not a bad idea as well. But I think, Kylie, let's talk more at Molt to see if we can support you with that, because for the reasons I've given, I think you deserve, as educators now, that you're able to say what's working and what's not, and we do really need to hold ourselves account for that. I think, do you realise almost all of the policies that are written from the EF or the DFE are written by people that have been teaching between 3 and 5 years? There's many of us that have been teaching a lot longer than that, and I urge you to consider the impact it has if those teachers who have been working the longest don't have a say in this process. So you're talking about publishing. I think there's some real strength in finishing with some clear outcomes. But Kylie, I think the new curriculum side of things in particular is quite interesting, but who knows how long that will take away from the day job. So I call this the day job too. Let's talk more on that. Thanks for being honest. I appreciate that. And
thank you.
Totally understand. Right, that's yellow block. They're off the hook. Well, half of yellow block.
Dan's here to talk about blue.
Yeah, I liked it when you said Daniel earlier. Daniel sounded much more in keeping with his new image this term. I like it.
Daniel, you did.
I might have said Daniel.
Oh, right, yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to testing myself. And obviously we'll do it together as well, which will be nice as a phase. So I think as a phase is definitely a nicer way to look at it than individually. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it.
Thanks, Daniel. With Jose going, Daniel, We're now looking for you to step up in that role as well. He knows what I mean. Right, that's blue block off the hook.
Hi Dave, this is Green Block. We were just saying that we like the fact that we're doing it as a phase, that we'll be collaborating together, that we can exchange ideas and do our presentation rather than doing it as an individual thing. I think we're going to enjoy working together on it.
Lovely. You can thank Eve for that one. Thanks, Helen. Okay, red, yellow, support centre in red, and then I think it's time for me to get out of the way actually.
Hiya, it's Kelly from Sports Centre. Danielle and I are really excited. Obviously, I'm super excited to be working with Danielle, and with her expertise of oracy, that's going to be really nice to look at that in here because we've already got changes afoot. So yeah, just looking forward to the challenge.
Thanks, Kelly.
Sorry, I'm back now. Sorry, I just had to step out, but I'm back. We are, as a block, particularly looking forward to using the Tribune within our art. I think we really have it, well, we're looking at our bookmarks, we really have it in our geography and our history, but the communication in the art and how that's going to follow through, we're looking forward to that.
That's good news, because that's one of the things Sarah and I have got to start investigating. How has planning been put together? I was interested to hear about the different parts of the school and your approaches on that. So by the end of the year, we want to say this is what we do, so that everyone in the school feels really safe and confident as to know exactly what we do and what impact it's beginning to have, because it'll be beginning, it won't be embedded. So, all right, Eve, I can't thank you enough, and I'm going to move out of the way. It's just lovely to be back with everybody, and I hope everyone had a really nice 2 weeks off at Easter. It's gorgeous weather, another nice weather for another week as well. So thank you very much for your time this evening. Some of you have got an email from me with some finance questions from the finance team that I need to respond to really urgently. And if you do need to call me tonight, although I'm taking my daughter to swimming in a moment, I will have to pick up because I have a real deadline to hit for that, and I really need your help, in particular around support centre. Penny, please. People premium, Margaret, if she's not there, is she? And PE in particular around those areas. Have a look. If you're not in the email, don't worry. But and Carly, I've got some nursery numbers to pick up, but I'm assuming Mandy will be able to do that for us. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Eve. Bye-bye.
Bye.